Hey everyone, welcome to Powertime. Let's have a listen to what's on today's show.
Official title is Vice President of Intelligent Applications at Power Platform Intelligent Applications at Microsoft. The challenge in tech is not things to believe in or potential things that sound promising. The challenge is, what to take seriously, what to say no to, and how to move beyond the comfort zone of the status quo into something that could be better. But gosh, let's not just build the last decade's software a little faster. I think we also have to go. It's not just because we give nice demos on stages in Vegas. It's because there's a real economic.
A good demo.
Let's get into it.
It's power time. Get ready, let's go.
Hey, welcome everyone to Powertime. My name is Scott Bennings. I'm joined here with Matt Noble to chat about all things tech, leadership, AI, and low code. And we've never gone down the path of chatting anything about politics before, but given that our guest today we actually interviewed on the election in America, Trump has gone in and all of a sudden we've seen, tech stocks flying. So I don't know what that all means, but I'm quite happy that my tech stock is up, and I'm sure Matt is happy that his crypto is up.
I'm very happy.
Yeah, yes. There you go.
Even my meme coins that I sit up endlessly trying to get rich quick meme coin Ponzi schemes, but the market's booming at the moment. So
my Dogecoin wallet has gone from 200 to 800, so I'm quite happy about that. So
that I told you not to buy, and you did buy. You very savvy investment, might I add. So you did. So I made
$600.
Well.
I'm happy about that. Yeah.
You're rich. We can retire. So,
but
all good. Full-time podcasters now. So
in all fairness, the stock market is really, really humming right now for tech stocks. So that was a really positive result. Tesla's up, as you would expect, right? Tesla's up, which is good. All of them. So, and in the world of AI right now, a whole bunch of exciting stuff sort of dropping right now, which is all part of the Ignite announcements that are going on at Microsoft as well. So Ignite dropping soon in a few days. A lot of.
Was there anything you can share with us, Scotty? Little secrets you can enlighten us to? You've got to keep it. Well, what can you tell our audience about what's going on?
Yeah, most of the stuff that I've seen it's got to be announced at the time of Ignite. I'm not sure when we're going to drop this podcast, before or after, so I can't go into too much detail, but really exciting around the direction of agents. And our guest today, Mr. Ryan Cunningham, no one knows more about this topic than him. He's the VP for Power Platform, so he runs everything. So glad to have him on the show.
We have brought you the best guest to talk about this particular
listeners, the best guest today. So to have that kind of discussion. So I was really impressed with the speed and pace that we're moving at. And it got me thinking, right? Like I've seen a whole bunch of TikToks lately around people creating apps using Cursor and all sorts of things going, here's an app. Go and, I don't know, create a UI that does this 3D modeling or something. And all of a sudden they put in a cursor and they've got this app built. And it got me thinking, are we moving into this new world where anyone can build an app really quickly? It's almost like shadow IT, right? We're going to end up with app sprawl, dev app sprawl, thousands and thousands of apps on platforms that no one knows, what they're running on. I think now when you actually think about it, that, if you fast forward kind of a few years from now, enterprises will need to have an enterprise-grade platform with strong governance, controls, and security. Otherwise, they're going to end up with all of these dev apps everywhere that they're going to have to maintain, and it's going to, cost a fortune. And
sounds like the Power Platform that you're referring to here, Scott. The Power.
It is the Power Platform. I'm just thinking
capabilities. So,
I'm thinking over the next few months that.
You're right, but you are right. Yeah.
Well, think about it. If you've got the ability to be able to go to a prompt and create an application in Python or any other code really, really quickly, someone in the enterprise has to then monitor, manage, patch, and control that. And Ryan touches on this in our conversation, right? On, you could still do that, and we'll all support that, and Microsoft's all for that, but you've got to be willing to do that iterative work.
It's the hidden cost, isn't it? It's the hidden cost to to that type of application development. But you're right, with this, COE, managed environments, all of these types of things, you get that out of the box, and it's should actually be taken quite seriously as well. I didn't think of this until now when you started speaking about it, but it actually makes a lot of sense that we do need to start considering this, because it is going to be easy to build pro code. We all know that. We kind of see that's the direction it's going. But you're right, yeah. How do you monitor? How do you govern all of that kind of stuff? And you get all of that within the Power Platform, plus more. All the native connectors, all of this kind of stuff. So I'm team Power Platform, by the way. I've been on the journey since day one. I think I said Ryan, when we spoke to Ryan, I'm an OG. I think I was in there since day one. So yeah, but I completely agree with you.
Yeah, if we go into our biggest customers right now, I mean, they're fine, right? They've invested a whole bunch in DevOps, open source. They have this big environment as control, but they're not going to let people just go rogue and build an app, right, in code. But what I can see in the future is the smaller customers, the few thousand employees that don't have the funding to do this big piece of work to create this kind of DevOps structure to govern apps. A lot of departments are going to go, what do you mean I have to, what do you mean I have to pay all this money for this SaaS app or all this money for this app over here to do my business process? I'll just ask ChatGPT to create it and give me the code, and I'll just ask for a virtual machine to host it. And that creates a worse problem than Access or, the old Lotus Note stuff. That creates app sprawl at a whole new level of rogue code at scale running.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm
adding this to my governance talk track when I talk about Power Platform right now. I'm jotting this all down because you're right.
So it's funny because so a lot of people right now are seeing the benefit going, hey, our developers are going to be super fast. But there's also the element of, it's not called Shadow IT because that was credit carding SaaS software. We have to come up with a new name.
Shadow AI or something. I don't know what
it's called. But anyway, I wouldn't be doing that. So I think the reign of the platform is coming. Like the platform is king. Invest in the platform to control and govern the code. It's what you're going to need. I think that's... There's a lot of positives in that.
I think the other thing we spoke about with Ryan was the role of the BA becoming really important and critical because they understand all of these processes. Yeah. And we don't want to steal all the thunder for the Ryan chat, but there are tools to enable that and, speed to value, speed to build, being able to put something in the hand of the business quickly to, critique, improve, all of that kind of stuff. There's tools being added to the Power Platform that I think are going to be truly transformational and really going to be utilized a lot moving forward. So again, I'm not going to talk too much about it because we do want you to listen to the whole episode rather than just listen to me and Scott at the start, but it is worth waiting for.
There was one golden nugget that I can't get it out of my head where Ryan talks about we don't want to just go and create the old stuff we used to create faster.
Yes.
What's the point of that, right? I just go, he's so right. The dawn of intelligent applications with a full agentic experience is coming. And, what does this mean for the way we build apps, run our companies? Everything has to be AI first now. Otherwise, you're pretty much not going to get off the starting gate, right? So this new, and these agentic experiences look really good. I've seen some vision demonstrators. We've seen some test dev stuff. We've seen some stuff that people have built out there. But the ability to be able to control a UI via a chat engine sitting alongside it and in real time, if you're shopping, shopping example is great. Hey, I want to go buy this new jacket, and it automatically just comes up and it adds it to your cart. This new kind of UI, I think it is really exciting. If that can get incorporated into the platform by default, so you just commission an app and you've got an intelligent app, that saves a lot of time. So I can even see open source developer frameworks, everything changed to support this new UI experience. It's so much more efficient than the old way we used to do things. And it's a great mix between, having an app and, and being able to interact with data in a really unique way.
I do think we need to change the way that we approach, UI design and application design and all of this kind of stuff to incorporate these intelligent experiences. Because, you're right. If we just keep building the same things and, hey, I'm going to put a Copilot chatbot in there, you're just really limiting what you can actually do with this platform moving forward. I'm excited to see in the next 6 to 12 months some of the cool stuff that, is out there that we build, other partners build, all of that kind of stuff, because we are truly at this tipping point now where, it's the unknown. Like, we're going to be building these really cool experiences, but it's just a really exciting time to be in technology. So watch this space. So,
yeah, absolutely. And agents as well. I think that's a really exciting, push forward into autonomous, kind of seamless, actionable kind of data and processes.
Yeah.
So, I'm busy. I need to go and do something. I don't know, I've got a banking process running. Perhaps I'm FSI customer. They're going through a home loan process or a KYC or something like this. Go and find out if this person's got a bad credit rating. So, it kicks off the agent to go and do that. Yeah. Which and it goes and does it, then delivers it back. And before that could have been like a manual process. So this agent stuff's really exciting. And I think on top of that, you've then got what I'm seeing, and I'm having more and more discussions around this right now, which is customers already have this RAG architecture set up. Like I was only having a conversation today, a very large customer with an architect, and he's saying, we've got 50 RAGs pre-built now. So to go and do various tasks like that. So you combine, that connectivity to that data with the autonomous agent, and then all of a sudden you've got, a lot of process savings in the background. So very interesting time over the next 12 months. It certainly is, if we should go into predictions. We should do predictions in either this podcast or the next one, Matt, because I would say...
Put me on the spot here. Yeah, next one, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the next one. I do think, I do, and we need to revisit our predictions from back in January and see if we were right.
I reckon we're miles off, because AI has transformed so fast in the last 12 months that I think... Yeah. I don't think we foresaw agents and all of this kind of stuff. I think anyway, let's do that.
That was our first podcast, though, Matt. So
we've come a long way. Yeah, I'm not listening to that ever again. Yeah, so I might ask my mum to replay what I spoke about, so I don't have to listen to my voice. So again, my mum's an avid listener of the podcast, so maybe I'll do that so she can recap what I spoke about, so I don't have to listen to myself talk podcast one, because I think Lisa Crosby said that the first time you hear yourself talk and you improve and stuff like that, you look back and you just cringe. But it's all a learning exercise, isn't it? So yeah,
it is. It's good. It's good learning. So look, I think at the end of the day, if I was going to put a prediction down, I would say that next year is the year of the agent. And I think
that's really gone out there with that one, haven't you?
Well, come on. Do you want something a bit more grit associated with it? Yeah.
I'm going to drill you down on that a bit further. That's pretty much Captain Obvious. That's definitely where we're going. We've been talking about that for months, but I'll drill down that one with you next podcast. Yeah, we're going to drill down to specific. Yeah, so let's
do this. Let's bring this. This will probably be our last podcast for the year, I would say, and we might be able to squeeze in one more. We'll see how we go. Maybe a Christmas themed podcast, or the very first podcast we do in January, let's do a predictions one, and we'll have a look and see where we're at. I think that'll be.
We're doing video too, aren't we?
Yeah, so exciting news.
Do my hair and shave. I don't sometimes do that. So Scott's pulled me up that a few times that when I film my podcast.
You need to up the game. We're going to go video next year.
And I'll be moved over east in my new podcast area. At the moment, we're filmed in my 1-bedroom apartment. So I'll have my dedicated podcast room with my cool podcast background of, books and all types of things. So
very good. Very good. Yeah. All right. So big things are happening next year for Powertime, which is awesome. So Matt, I think we should bring Ryan on. We've probably waffled on enough. Everyone's probably sick of hearing us. Everyone's tuning in to listen to Ryan for the year. And what do you think? We'll bring Ryan on and chat about intelligent applications and agents and what we're looking forward to over the next few months. And,
let's do it.
It's an exciting conversation.
Done.
Hey everyone, welcome to Powertime and welcome back. I'm really excited today to introduce our guest today, Ryan Cunningham, who is a VP at Microsoft looking after the Power Platform and good 9 years at Microsoft as well. So I'm sure Ryan has got a lot of things that he can share with us in that time on a platform that has grown unbelievably. So myself, I'm nearly 8 years at Microsoft. So I've seen the platform grow from start to finish. I remember back in the day with the Power platform being only a few thousand users using it, and us going to talk to customers about it. They didn't even know what low code was back in those days. So I will pass over to Ryan so he can introduce himself. I'm also joined here with Matt, my partner in crime on this podcast. So, Ryan, maybe start with a small introduction. I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast would absolutely know who you are, though, but just in case there's one person who doesn't.
Hopefully there are many who don't. Your listeners need to get out explore the world. If I'm a celebrity, we're in a very narrow niche. But
celebrity to us.
My name is, fair enough. So I'm Ryan. Like you mentioned, my official title is Vice President of Intelligent Applications at Power Platform Intelligent Applications at Microsoft. And that's a fancy way in a lot of syllables of saying I look after, kind of the core low-code application platform, and specifically the product and engineering organizations that build it and make it happen. And to your point, I've been doing this for a while. I actually joined Microsoft just about 9 years ago to work on this team in a very early part of a software project that at the time was known as Project Sienna, but sort of grew into and became Power Apps. And gosh, it's been a wild ride since then. The latest public statistic is, 25 million people are using Power Apps every month. The actual number is now a lot higher than that, breaking through 30 and continuing to charge. So, we're starting to see just a lot of mainstream adoption. I still feel new. I think both from a Microsoft perspective and from a tech perspective and a low-code perspective, especially in the last couple of years, we've kind of shaken this whole thing upside down and reset a bunch of expectations around what AI can do in this broader space, and everything is exciting again. And 20, 30 million people is a tiny fraction of humans with screens and jobs. We got a lot more growing yet to do. So very excited about what comes next.
Well, it's awesome to have you on the podcast, and thank you for joining. Project Sienna just brought back so much memories to me. I remember that project name well, and the start. There's two things I think I'll remember at Microsoft, which is back that, like trying to, I guess, convince people what low code is and what the benefits are for a few years, and then building the platform up locally in Australia and New Zealand to where it is today. And then probably about a year or two ago when AI kind of dropped, right? Just a question. I mean, we like to talk a lot about technical leadership and being able to, rebuild people's careers. I think low code's really good for that. We've seen a lot of people, and we've had people on the podcast, hey, I was a librarian, or, I was working at Telstra, or I was working at Heathrow Airport, and now all of a sudden, I'm running a platform at a company that's huge. Right. How do you go with your engineers? When AI kind of dropped, how do you convince a whole bunch of people that this thing's going to be amazing, we need to change our product strategy because, we can see so much future down this direction? Well, how was that conversation when, probably 2 years ago now,
It was a conversation, I would say it's a conversation that happens every day in this business, and happened every day 9 years ago and continues to happen every day. And not because, it's that people don't believe yet. I think the challenge in tech is not things to believe in or potential things that sound promising. The challenge is, what to take seriously and what to say no to, and how to move beyond the comfort zone of the status quo into something that could be better, but is not yet. And I think, tech people are kind of wired to be optimists, but also wired to be big skeptics. And I think that's kind of the big story of business software in general, right? Yep. We've built a whole bunch of expectations about what a business application needs to do, and what type of person we should trust to create it and implement it, and what type of person uses it and how they use it. And some of those are well-founded, and some of those are open for adaptation. And I think, even from the early days, we've really started pushing the boundaries on what people expect from this space. And particularly expect from tools that we give employees and tools that we use to run companies and operate supply chains and make sure people get paid, and do all the fundamental work of the economy really kind of flows through this space of business apps, and they haven't really changed in a long time. So sort of there's a lot of inertia in that space. How do you start to keep pushing against those boundaries? It has to not be just about tech. It has to not be just about some fancy new thing. It has to be about what actually causes pain now and today, right? And that's the only way that we've really been able, both internally and externally, to keep having that conversation over and over again. How do we keep pushing again, really be restless and unsatisfied with the status quo and push for something better? And then tech comes into the picture. Okay, what tech makes it practical and viable to go push against that pain? And so, in a world of generative AI, I mean, look, we shipped the first GPT model in Power Apps in 2021.
I remember
12 months before everybody's mom called them up. And at the time, it was very basic, and it couldn't do a lot. But it's really about, as tech becomes more viable to address new categories of challenge, then we can get a lot more bold about how we approach those categories of challenge. And it's real hard to shake yourself out of your comfort zone on a daily basis, but that's really the mode that we're in right now.
I wish that if I had one wish for the Power Platform, I guess you're kind of the Power Platform genie. If I did have that wish, but you won't be able to grant this one, Ryan. I wish we had the AI that we have now back about 400 meetings ago when Power Platform first started out.
Agreed.
Because I am sure I've been through like hundreds of meetings with customers where we could have solved their problem just bang straight up with the tech that we have, the capabilities that we have today. It's just been a phenomenal journey. I do remember when GPT 3.5 landed in the product, and AI Builder and all of these things, and we're able to go and do amazing things. But now it's kind of next level innovation.
Well, and it's humbling to realize, and I've been saying this from the beginning, the platform today is the worst and least capable that it will ever be.
Yeah.
If we're doing our jobs right, it continues to get better every single day. And I think one of the really hard things as a product person is, you got to be the biggest fan of your thing and the biggest critic of it at the same time. Sort of know when to code switch between those two pieces. But, as proud as I am of the Power Platform, you have to also look at, there is so much more we can yet do and make easier and make better and make faster. And it's really just about being very picky about what chunk of that problem to tackle next and how to really move it forward in a big way.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, completely agree. As a fellow OG member of the Power Platform, I started on the Power Platform when it first came out. So I've seen the journey it's come on. I was aware that, these AI-infused experiences were actually, like you say, in 2021 coming out as part of that. So you continually to add and reiterate to that product. Talk to me about the concept of an intelligent application. Like, what does it actually mean for those listening as well? I think we're aware of it as well, but want to hear it from yourself. This concept of an intelligent application, what does that mean? What does that look like? All of those types of things.
Yeah, so we think there's a couple of different dimensions to this. And I would say, for us, that concept wraps up both, how I build software and also what it can do, and then how I manage all of that, times 100 or 1,000 inside of an organization. And so, for us, there's a bigger picture here, but it's really important that we think about them as intelligent apps, as sort of the thing you create in the first place. Because a lot of the energy in the generative AI world right now, particularly around software development and even low code, is actually going into the building part. And that's really interesting. And we're doing interesting things there too. But gosh, let's not just build the last decade's software a little faster. I think we also have to go look at the software itself needs to change and evolve. And, I would say maybe early in, the rise of ChatGPT, a lot of traditional apps people kind of had an identity crisis. Like, oh my God, is all software going away? Are we going to regress 50 years of user experience development back to the command line and just chat all the time? And there was a moment where like serious people thought that was the truth. I think, now that we've moved a little bit past that hype cycle, we've realized a couple things. What chat is really useful in certain contexts. I mean, certainly we all do it every day in our personal and work lives a lot, but it is not a replacement for every experience. And so there are certain things that will always require a more structured application. That does not mean it always has to be rigidly predetermined and every detail finely crafted by a developer and then never changed once an end user goes through it. And I think particularly in the biz apps context, as I'm entering data, as I'm exploring data, as I get added to something late in the process and I'm trying to catch up on it, there's lots of opportunities to build more adaptive experiences that, sort of on demand help a user out, where a developer didn't have to anticipate that exact moment and scenario. And so for one thing, an intelligent app is generative. It will generate user experience on demand and adapt to what people need. I would say it also is doing that, in a way that is, actually driving knowledge and reasoning into that frame. It'll help me add to a support case that's already been running for 5 days and catch me up. What happened and what should I pay attention to? Those are things that require a higher level than just, display for me a different type of visualization. Yeah. And then I would say the third piece of this is really less about chat or even a dynamic application. There's a lot of stuff that we do today that doesn't need to be fully reactive to a human pressing a button or typing into a box. And I think that's the other big fallacy of chat as the UX modality is, gosh, if we're going to really build agents that are incredibly capable and can reason over all our information, it's like hiring a bunch of new employees and training them on everything your company's ever done, and then going and sitting them in the corner and saying, only speak when you're spoken to. It's like a big undersell of the capability. So how do we build agents that can actually work autonomously and take parts of the what used to be humans always entering data into boxes or always swivel chairing between one system and another? How do we start to take that and build agents that can do a lot of that rote manual work, or at least chunks of that rote manual work, and be managed by human oversight? And so an intelligent app kind of wraps all of that up. It is, how do I generate experiences when I need them? How do I use better cognitive capabilities to bring intelligence to that generation? And then how do I actually start to automate parts of your workflow so that you don't have to do it manually all the time? And that's really at the nucleus of what we're building. And then that immediately begs the question, okay, how do we build those things? That's not just traditional, traditional biz apps coding or even traditional drag and drop in a low code frame. There's more interesting ways that we can go create those conditions. And then how do we manage them once they're out there in the world and secure them and scale them? So we think about the intelligent studio, the intelligent set of governance features, the control plane around it, quite a bit as well.
No, I completely agree. And for someone that's, immersified in tech, I think this is one of the most exciting times to be involved in technology as part of it, particularly with agents. So Scott and me talk about agents all the time and how we kind of see this as kind of the next wave of coming and all of that kind of stuff. So for those listening, talk to us a bit more about agents. Yeah. What's the vision for agents, all that type of stuff? Because I think it's probably the hottest topic in the market at the moment. So tell me your perspective of that.
Yeah. It's also, I would say every major tech change we go through a change in language too. We sort of look at how do we build new language to describe what's going on, and
agentic.
Exactly.
Yeah. Come up with I've got the tattoo. I've got the agentic tattoo. There we go.
Somebody in a meeting earlier this week talked about agentic transpilation, and I was like, I don't think you can
transpilation.
That's a word now. We're taking it.
I don't think you can talk about that in a public school in Florida. I mean, we definitely can't talk about that. Like we build our own terms that are very techie in nature, and I think that's just sort of a tendency of technology people. Really what an agent is a digital coworker who's working on your behalf, and in a lot of ways an agent is the same thing as what we maybe previously described as a bot, but doesn't just trigger on human types words into a box, right? They can listen for events. Record is updated in the database. New hire is added to the system, exception is raised, refund is requested, you name it, and start to take action behind the scenes. And some of that will still involve generating text and interacting with humans, but how do I start to get a lot more sophisticated about the types of events inside of an organization that I can start to automate? And so an agent really is an evolved form of automation. We've had automation inside a business for a very long time. We've had it certainly digitally. Power Automate's been around for a long time. Other process automation tools have been around for a long time. And we've had it in the physical world. We've spent decades really automating manufacturing processes and automating supply chains and delivery processes. This is actually not a new concept at all. The new part is that a lot of that traditional automation is very deterministic. It's very if-then driven. I have one specific thing that happens, and then I want one other specific thing to happen as a result, or if then else. And that has been very useful for a segment of things. But there's a lot of stuff out there that has still required just a little bit of judgment or a little bit of fault tolerance that has not been pragmatic to automate in those traditional ways. And that's what agents open up just a lot of opportunity for inside of companies.
Hey, Ryan, I'm keen to talk a bit more about kind of the maker experience. I can definitely see a world. And look, I remember back in the day when we spoke a lot about citizen development, and, I remember personally getting smashed by a lot of the big banks in Australia around governance.
I was with you on some of those calls,
I think I was running a governance call maybe 3 times a day for like 2 years, right? So, in the end, we created Power Hour to kind of, get the message out around governance and that, and I think I can see a world where as a maker, I'll look back at the way that I create Power Apps today as being old. And I can also see in the dev world the way I create apps completely changing to this model where I upload my data model in an Excel properly. I upload a video recording of the process, maybe in another app or maybe something I've drawn. I upload my UX experience, my default tooling around that, what I think that should look like. And then I give that to a language model, and it thinks about it and comes back with a Power App. Is that where we think we're going to land with this? Because I can kind of see that in ProCode, but I could never see ProCode going to citizen develop, because this could be the great unlock for the business analyst.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're not far off. I would say, there's some important nuances to this, though. Like, absolutely, we see a world in which software development shifts from hands-on keyboards expressing logic in text and then, Git merging it from multiple machines into one branch and then compiling it and building it and testing it. I think that will still happen in the world. As a software professional and a Microsoft shareholder, please don't stop writing code tomorrow. But I think if you look at the historical arc that we've been on, in general, even outside of Power Platform, all we've been doing for software developers for 40 years is adding layers of abstraction so that we don't have to recreate everything from low-level assembly code, and we can work on top of the work of others. We can bring in packages that are open source or pre-built. We can work on top of highly abstracted IaaS and PaaS services. We can build in, much higher level languages without work going down to the lower level ones. And so in many ways, it's just a natural progression for even professional software development to move several more layers up the stack. And in many ways, that's part of what has driven, I would say, the more advanced type of development on Power Platform over the last few years, is a lot of existing professional teams realizing, hey, when I build on this platform, I'm getting 64 underlying Azure data services abstracted away for me. I don't have to worry about all the lower level bits, and I have a better interface with my business users and my stakeholders. They can work on the same toolkit as well. So I can cut out a lot of that middle ground stuff that we've invented as an industry, because, finance people don't speak software and vice versa. So we have to go fill that gap with, translating a lot of expertise. So that is kind of a natural arc. I would say for just general purpose, come to Power Apps, bring your screenshots, bring your examples, feed it into a system, go generate a plan, generate software. Absolutely, that's the future we're excited about. That's what we demoed at the Power Platform conference, and a lot of people.
I was hoping you'd bring that up.
Yep, in the plan designer. But we don't think it's a magic wand, right? We really think that multiple rounds of iteration on that plan are really important. And that's one of the things we've learned, I would say, even the hard way through some of our early forays into AI in the platform. Like, single prompt, single shot, just isn't capable even yet or ever of producing great granular results in a complicated problem space. You have to work through it over time. And so we, just like you work through it today in a software project, we can just compress a lot of those steps. So yeah, bring me a screenshot of a legacy app, take a photo of a whiteboard, write a couple sentences into a box, and we won't still go off and build the perfect solution. We'll structure it and say, okay, it looks like you have these 3 users and they have these requirements or jobs to be done. Does that look right? And then let's iterate on that for a little while. And then let's go generate a data model. Does that look right? And let's iterate on it a little bit. And then let's go generate artifacts on top. And then 3 days later, you're going to come back and add a new set of requirements or add a new set of stimulus. And we're going to go recalc, regenerate that plan and update different artifacts as a result. That iterative nature is really, really important at a macro level and at a micro level in all of these different interactions. And so that's really the pattern that we're building towards on the platform.
You mentioned a word there, or a couple of words, the Power Apps Plan Designer. And again, you did launch it at PPC. I was there. I saw your wonderful demo and presentation. You're always one of the best presenters I always see, and always tell you that every time I catch up with you. So talk to me a bit about the Power Apps Plan Designer for those who aren't aware listening to this call, what that is, what's the vision, all of those types of things.
Yeah, so the Plan Designer is a brand new software project. We announced it at the Power Platform Conference. It's in an early access preview right now, coming very soon to a public preview near you. But it is a new experience that starts at powerapps.com, where I can describe a business problem and add context, even upload screenshots or take a picture of a whiteboard, you name it. And then we will help generate a plan for a robust solution. So today, a lot of people can go to powerapps.com, type into a box, and we'll start generating a couple of tables in Dataverse and a Canvas app on top of it. This is a lot different. This sort of steps back and it says, let's analyze the whole problem space. Let's, lay out what we think the users and user stories are, what the data model should be. And then it will actually suggest and generate multiple applications and automations for those scenarios on top of that data model. And so it's really a way to start thinking about whole solution design in Power Platform. And it takes a lot of the patterns that any of us as software professionals would do today when faced with a new problem. Think through the structure of the users, the data, the solution architecture, and just sort of puts it onto a framework that can be repeated every time. And that does a couple of things. A, it steers people down better patterns for solution design. Whether they're a career professional or they're just starting out, it sort of follows best practices. But B, it also creates much richer context for the AI to generate successive things from. Okay. If I just type a sentence into a box, it's really hard for me to generate the perfect data model. If I have collaboratively generated a whole requirements document, it's much easier for me to generate a better data model and a better set of assets on top. And so it really makes the human a partner to the AI in building out the right set of contexts and prompts for the next steps of the plan.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I see the way certainly my team, my TSs all work over time to become more of a consultative approach. What's the business problem? Let's see how we can address it and have almost things built in real time whilst you're going through that process. So a real change in the way that we're working for the positive, I think. I was listening to a quote the other day by another podcaster actually, and they said that, the real currency today is speed. If you can, by the time you've had 3 meetings about the problem, I've already fixed it, failed twice, and come up with the solution. And I feel like this is a real enabler to kind of get that stuff done. Yeah, maybe it's not the first run on the perfect app, but we've already built 3 apps on the whiteboard, basically.
Right.
Before you even get to the end result. So yeah, I think it's an amazing future. I don't know, Matt, how that works for your team at NCS.
Yeah.
Different way.
I'm really excited for this as well. I think what this does is really empowers the BA as well as part of this application development process. And I think the role of the BA is going to be really interesting and really, like I say, really important, more so, even more so now in the future. So them putting those requirements in, them meeting with the business, using the plan designer to start building and taking the business on the journey as part of that application. Is that kind of what you're sort of seeing as well, right?
100%. And I think, look, we're not building all this to replace any existing effort in the market. It's actually, there's just a lot of software that's not getting built today.
Migrated.
Right? Or got built a long time ago and is not getting modernized or migrated fast enough. And, a lot of people have asked over the years, where's my migration tool for Lotus Notes or for Access databases or for, custom software X? those things are hard, to really understand and translate. And even if you had a magic wand, you probably don't want to lift a 15-year-old piece of software out of a legacy platform and just pixel by pixel rebuild it exactly as is in a modern platform. You want to rethink the process and rethink like what of this current modern stack would help here and could be more useful here. And that's something that requires reasoning and logic and understanding the process and problem at a much more deeper level than just what is the current data model and software or lack thereof. That is what business analysts do. The challenge is that doing that all as a human process has a certain course and speed, and we know that isn't fast enough. And so it's sort of, how do we sort of compress that same process and expertise into something that can go faster, you can do more of per unit of time. That's really the whole core thesis of the platform in general. And again, AI just helps push it forward faster than what we could do with point and click alone.
I know, after talking about the platform for many years now, some of the biggest hurdles we had to overcome, particularly our big regulated customers, big FSI customers, was really internal process. It's like, hey, we can build an app really quickly. But by the time they wrap their traditional process around the low-code process, it becomes big and bulky and things like that.
Right.
How have you seen customers kind of adopt this stuff now? Is it getting faster than it was a few years ago? Are they really leaning in now?
Every customer is at a different stage of their journey. You have customers that are still very against low code, and although that's fewer and farther between, you also have customers that are really all in and moving super fast. We one of the customers that came to the Power Platform conference in Las Vegas was HSBC. Richard Lord was the CIO of their commercial bank based in Hong Kong. They now do all commercial credit and lending and loan evaluation on Power Platform. The first version of that solution, they deployed to 11 markets in production in less than 90 days. And more of that time was spent in compliance hurdles than actual development. Right? And so for a organization well over 100 years old that operates in basically every latitude and longitude on the planet and is highly regulated in all of them, to move that fast is unheard of. That's one of hundreds of solutions in production within that organization right now. And so, figuring out how to really closely partner between tech and business. That was, an initiative sponsored by leadership in both departments, in the office of the CIO and the office of the chief operating officer, working against a real business problem and outcome, empowered to go fast on a platform that made going fast practical, and then figure out how to replicate that over and over and over again. That's the ticket. That's how a lot of customers are driving really accelerated transformation and just driving a lot of cost savings out of the platform. Because everything I build and deploy, even to premium Power Platform licenses in Power Apps, I'm not accruing any additional cost for every new workload I deploy, because those users are covered with a user license that lets them use an unlimited number of apps. And so, it's really these organizations that realize, hey, this is a way to go faster at transformation, and I get a clear economic benefit around consolidating my cost. They're investing in a big way in order to take advantage of that outcome. So we are certainly seeing that happen and happen in many different sectors that we didn't traditionally think of as fast movers or early adopters of democratized tech. But in many ways, doing it because it's actually a net security and trust benefit compared to what these processes happened on before. When they were all in spreadsheets under a desk or in a legacy system or a one-off SaaS product that a department brought in, gosh, that threat landscape is actually much scarier. And if I can start to move them onto a platform that does have a lot of mature governance and security concepts, I'm actually getting a trust benefit and a efficiency benefit at the same time. And that's really why Power Platform is growing as such a big business today. It's not just because we give nice demos on stages in Vegas. It's because there's a real economic,
a good demo,
sort of factor for customers.
I think it's interesting. So Matt and I have spoken about this before around the agentic experience, right? So I don't know, you want some time off at work. This is a great example. I use it all the time. Are you going to go click on an app, a Power app, and go, I want time off in, December at these days, submit? Or is the future, hey, I feel like some time off in December around Christmas time. Can you book? Oh, what's the weather going to be like? Yeah, what's the best days? Yeah, okay. All right. Is there any public holidays? How do I maximize my leave? Yeah, bang, book. And it does the booking, right? So I think there's just some use cases that there's a heap of benefits to that agentic experience. So you're kind of looking at it at three angles now, right? Do I put it in a chatbot? Do I create a low code app, or do I go down a pro code app? And there's probably I don't think we've got all the answers right. Like it's right platform for right business case, but I know my team's putting a lot of thought into this right now. Going, how do we go to these big enterprise customers who might have to build 5,000 apps over the next year or two? What does it look like? So, what are your thoughts around that? How do you qualify what use case for what?
Well, we definitely don't see these things as mutually exclusive by any means, right? And I think, there's a lot of places where particularly a chat experience is better than the status quo. Is customer wanting to get advice on when to take a holiday is perhaps a good example. However, even in that scenario, somebody's going to have to pull a report about all the vacation time that was granted. And somebody's going to have to go look at, for all of their employees in their team, when did they approve or not approve? And somebody's going to have to click on something and at some point approve that vacation time. And at some point that has to end up in your paycheck and it has to go integrate back with a core HCM system. And, none of these things happen in isolation inside of an organization. And so even for that one use case, you're probably looking at several apps and lots of automation and, maybe a couple of different agents that manifest in more of a chatbot way in addition to orchestrating work behind the scenes. And you might be connecting to existing systems, a Workday or an SAP SuccessFactors. You might be writing a custom connector to go call back into, an existing service or API. These are not monolithic solutions. They don't get birthed out of thin air. They all happen, at least in any organization of reasonable size, they happen inside of an existing messy environment. And so for us, it's much more, it's not an either or, kind of when to use what conversation. It's use the best tool for the job, build on Power Platform, always stay at the highest layer of abstraction that you can, write and maintain code only where you must. I think a lot of times we get wrapped up in this conversation of should I do it in Power Platform or should I write code? And we only think of it through the lens of getting started and deploying the first time. The real question to ask is, 3 years from now, do I still want to own that code or not? Do I want to be responsible for the call in the middle of the night when it breaks? Do I want to be responsible for its next .NET Core upgrade, its TLS migration, its security? And there are some places where from a business perspective, that's true. Because it will be so differentiated to my company that I want granular control over it. There are many places where that's not true, where, customers over time, don't want to own that responsibility. They want to push it down into a lower level platform. And that's why we have a Power Platform in the first place. That's why we have an abstraction layer over a lot of these resources. And so, our mantra is always, stay as high as you can, go as low as you must, basically in the stack when you're thinking about whether or not to create and own new code assets. And increasingly, AI can help you do that and do that in the moment. We're already seeing that in things like GitHub Copilot and other tools from other vendors. Really we can stitch together these pieces into a much bigger puzzle.
Reminds me of the days of access databases and when you go and talk to customers and they go, I don't know who wrote that. That was years ago, but we're still using it, right? Yeah. Don't know what it's doing.
They are still out there in the wilderness. Trust me, from partner land, there is a lot of access. There's a lot of
learners. They're terrifying, yes.
They're terrifying, yeah. There's thousands of them, yeah? So again, building that business case, providing the tools, a plan designer to help them modernize quickly, you know what I mean? So I think that's going to be really a key to success moving forward because every customer wants to move, but they're looking at this 1,000, they're going, how do we even get started? So I think having the plan designer as a starting point as well is going to be really effective moving forward.
And that's 100% why we're building it. And I think, historically, modernizing all that legacy stuff, whether it was the little things like access databases or even big enterprise applications that were bespoke built, 10 years ago, replacing that stuff was sort of like a tax. It was sort of like replacing the roof on your house. You knew you had to do it, but you put it off as long as possible because it's going to be disruptive. It's going to be expensive. And at the end of the day, you're not really going to get a measurable benefit from it other than not getting leaked on. And I think that sort of application modernization historically has always sort of trended to that type of discussion. Like, we had it based on fear, not based on opportunity. But now this world has changed a lot. And I think there certainly is still an element of fear, but there's a new element of fear here, which is if you don't figure out how to go cut massive amounts of human labor out of your process, your competitor will. And so you got to go figure that out. But on the flip side of that is, gosh, there's massive opportunity here. You're not just replacing roof for roof. You're going to go design an entirely new house to live in, and you're going to go think about entirely new ways to serve customers and process employee, requests and do, and that's now a creative exercise and a competitive exercise in a way that it's not just a lift and shift anymore. And that's really the spirit of the plan designer. Is it's not a migration tool. It's not a one-to-one translation. It's let's go understand what actually needs to come out of this business process and build a better piece of software that was never possible before. And that's where we see a lot of opportunity in the market.
You know what I love about the Power Platform, Ryan, is that we used to talk a lot about the data feedback loop, which is this concept of create data, grab that data, put it back into the system, create more data, iterate on that data, and just continually learn. And when I look at that moving into the world of AI, when you really think about what's important for AI, it's connected data systems, accurate data, for sure, right? And a fast pace of being able to take on this innovation, right? Fast innovation. How can I just adopt quickly? The Power Platform's like the perfect, if you were going to build the perfect architecture for AI, you'd have to say 100%. The Power Platform is right up the top of that, right? It's just being like, it's almost like it's purposely developed to make use of AI moving forward. So kudos to you guys. I think it's just an amazing development sort of pathway. It's been on a roadmap.
And particularly this space of business applications, I think, is the one that is most ripe for real value in the near term, in the next couple of months and couple of years. There are certainly a lot of places where AI will already is impacting our personal lives, and certainly a lot of places where from a productivity perspective, it can do amazing things for us. But, what is really going to affect my bottom line and, open up new top line opportunities? It's my core operational tools. It's how I run my business. It's how I sell things to customers, how I fulfill on those orders, how I manage my supply chain, how I deal with customer feedback. That's really the epicenter of what makes every organization run. And that does rely on a lot of really structured process and information that has kind of been stuck in a rut for a long time. I think this is sort of an opportunity for us to really, really disrupt a lot of those core processes today for the better.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I see is the behavioral approach. We got to be the way we interact with technology is changing. Yeah, I'm getting better at using Copilot every day, but my initial thought is to defer to the previous methods and stuff like that. So, talk to me about how Microsoft is kind of handling that from an intelligent application experience. The adopting of this technology from a behavioral shift.
Yeah. And you guys at a lot of different levels. And I would say, we're thinking about it even in terms of how we build product, how we structure our teams, how we think about iteration loops and even experimentation. Historically, experimentation was something that was a lot more of a factor in consumer-facing software where you had really high volumes and you could go change 2% of the traffic on Bing to, use a button that was slightly different and statistically measure difference. In business applications, historically, we always expected to be a lot more rigid and deterministic. Now we're in a place, you talk about feedback loops of data, optimization, maybe it's not even the UX is changing every day because of, the button layout, but it's what model are we doing behind that? How are we prompting? How are we separating that into multiple shots and improving how we think about context to get better outcomes for things like form prediction or things like a smart grid. It's really actually revolutionized a lot of how we think about how we build product already. We've been on this really interesting journey just in the last couple of months of having form prediction in market. If you load a model-driven Power App or Dynamics app and you have recent records and you're going to go create a new one, we'll go predict fields for you. And now we showed this at PPCC and it's now rolling out in a public preview. You can paste content on top of that form and we'll
I love this, by the way.
It's such
super
a cool.
Super cool. Yeah.
And there's really, really cool advancements coming to it very soon. But a lot of that, I mean, we have learned so much, and we were so wrong in our initial assumptions about what would make for great predictions and what people would want and would accept. And only by getting into market and looking at actual, runtime adoption of the feature, feedback of the feature, effectiveness of the feature, have we been already run dozens of experiments to optimize and massively improved, both the relevance and the coverage of what's being predicted. And still, it's early days. We have a long way yet to go. And so, that mindset is really important for us, for product developers. It's going to be important for customers too. Their first intelligent apps that they roll out will also be as uncapable as they ever could be. Right? So think about how to tune and optimize and bring new knowledge sources and structure forms a certain way, whatever it is. That is a really important mentality for a lot of our customers to get into as well.
You really want to, as a customer, to be seriously considering, how you bring all this stuff together and training for people. And I think it's also a lot is changing people's mindset, right? I found over the years that sometimes that can really hold people back. At Microsoft, we call it a growth mindset. I think, it's really important when leading these kind of teams to make sure that they really understand that. Do you have any advice for customers that might have a group of engineers that they're, maybe struggling with this at the moment, how they get started, all these kind of things they can really lean into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what every software organization and even non-software organizations are figuring out right now, is sort of how do we adapt to the moment, and how do we take advantage of all the great stuff that's going on around the market, and what is permanent and what is ephemeral, because you can go watch a LinkedIn feed or any other news feed and you see 1,000 things go by in an hour that sound promising. So how do
Sounds like TikTok to me.
Right, exactly. What do I focus on, right? I would say, in not just being a selfish plug, but this is why building on a platform as opposed to trying to recreate everything yourself from scratch is really valuable, particularly for smaller teams that are not richly resourced in data science and have been doing this for years. I think we had a Gartner analyst come join a meeting of a bunch of customers in the EU recently, and he talked about this post from the CEO of Klarna, about how they basically kicked out Salesforce and Workday and replaced it all on their own inbuilt AI. And this person made the good point, like, okay, what you didn't see behind that tweet is that A, they're a pretty simple business, all things considered, and B, they took a whole team of top AI engineers offline for an entire year to go be able to do that. And so most people aren't able to go do that today. But if you start building on top of a platform where a lot of that is already happening, and you really start focusing on how do I apply and configure those pieces, really start focusing on the problem, not just the cool tech, to kind of tie it back to the beginning conversation, then you can actually make really quick progress. And look, we've seen customers do that already. We've had customers on stage that are already diverting, $1 million a year in cost by compressing how much traffic goes to an internal IT help desk, or how much cost avoidance they can drive out of a returns operation in customer service, because they're focusing on the problem and then looking at the best possible tech to apply to it. And so, for me, that's really the starting point. Whether you're using our platform or not, just stay focused on the problem and don't build cool stuff for the sake of building cool stuff, because we've all seen that tech movie play out.
It reminds me back in the day, when you'd go and build a private cloud, and then each company would go build their own private cloud, right? And then the cloud existed. And I used to say to customers about the Power Platform, it is kind of imagine being born with the memory of a 60-year-old. So you're starting at that point, right? And that's kind of where the Power Platform is now, right? Like new people come onto the platform in engineering at 20 to 25 graduates, and they're already starting at the top level. They don't have to build all that legacy now. They just iterate on top of it. So I can't even imagine, 5 years from now, the innovation that's going to sit on that platform and what people are going to be able to just access, right? Just turn it on and go use it. So,
no doubt.
I can't even imagine 1 to 2 years from now. So I'm interested to see where on this journey.
It's impossible to forecast,
I've never seen something evolve so far. we've already spoken about 20 different things on this podcast that have come out in the last sort of 6 months.
Yeah.
So, like I say,
create a
it's gonna
3-year
be
roadmap
really
for our
interesting.
customers.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible.
Yeah,
to do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I actually had a customer pull me aside recently. He said, "Could you stop shipping things so quickly?"
Yeah.
just slow it
Just
down.
pause for a minute. Yeah. My team says that all the time, actually. Yeah. I've had to develop new techniques to absorb. Actually, just ship all your new features in a language model at the same time so we can educate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's what, you're so right on the private cloud analogy. And, it's like, I have had customers say, we're building our own LLM. Gosh, that's expensive to do well and do right. And the difference between, doing it because to say you did it and doing it and actually doing it well is, literally billions of dollars today. And so, getting the level of the stack at which you're iterating right, that is super important because you can burn a lot of time and energy at the wrong altitude and do it real quick, especially in this computing environment and where costs are right now. So it's a hard thing to get right. And different organizations are going to be at different levels of that stack, right? Some organizations are going to be well-resourced enough to really get serious about concepts like fine-tuning and multi-model management and really get down into the weeds. I think there are a lot of other organizations that can't do that at all. And even the ones that can only afford to do it for a certain number of projects at a time. And so really there's a much larger white space out there. And that's why the higher levels of abstraction exist in PowerPoint.
And I dare say it won't be long too before language models start really predicting business processes and saying to customers, hey, why don't you try this process, which will be based off every process that's ever consumed. And there'll be a whole bunch of kind of benefits to that for customers, like a shared knowledge base over time as well. So it's just going to get better. We've probably got enough time for maybe one more question, Matt. I've kind of hogged the last few.
I can see you chomping at the bit, so you got it. Yeah, you go.
Ryan, I will say a really big thank you for coming on the podcast today. We've had an extraordinary number of people keen to listen to this podcast as we've sort of socialized a bit that you're coming on. So a big thank you for really just joining us, and hopefully our customers and our partners and everyone that's listening into this can glean a bit of a bit of an advantage, hopefully, and really have a bit more of an understanding on the Power Platform, which we love so much. So any parting words, Ryan?
Well, hey, I'd turn that gratitude right back around. I really appreciate what you guys are doing with this podcast and how long you've been at it and how many great voices you brought together. I would also say just one tiny example of what makes this community so awesome. I think that's really the great part of Power Platform is not any one piece of technical capability. It's a group of humans who are willing to push back on the status quo and do it together and help each other out in the process. That keeps us going, right? And in terms of people that build, core software components, but gosh, we're just building tools at the end of the day. The really cool part is what people do with them. And so I'm really grateful to both of you and to anybody unlucky enough to still be listening to this for what you do every day and the energy you pour into the platform. Please keep it coming because we got a long way to go still, and this kind of engagement is exactly what it takes.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks again, Ryan.
Yeah, cheers.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Ryan, Matt and I today on the podcast. Just a quick note, anything that we say is not the point of view of Microsoft or NCS. And if you get a chance, click follow on our LinkedIn and of course follow on this podcast as well. The more listeners we have, the more podcasts we can make and the better we can make the show. Thanks again and have a fantastic week.